So we're here in Perek Revi, Perek Hacholitz Livimto, and we got up to Lamed Vav. So we're on Lamed Vav and Aleph, and we are towards the bottom of the Amud. Omar Rava, let's count up from the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up from the bottom. Now, in the previous Gemara, we had quoted a brisa to support Reish Lakish. The question is, if a Yevama is a Mu'uberes, whether or not the Chalitza is valid, such that if later on she gives birth to a stillborn, a Nefel, whether or not the original Chalitza that he gave her when she was Mu'uberes is valid. Reish Lakish rejects the validity of that chalitza because ayin olav. We have to know for sure whether or not there is zera. And if we have doubts that maybe there is zera and she'll carry perhaps the full term, then there's no chalitza. Chalitza only applies and is meaningful if it's zera ein lo, and we know it's zera ein lo. And Reish Lakish went a step further, and he said that even if he was miyabim her, he had bia with her, and she was a muberes, that yibum is not a valid yibum. And the Gemara concluded by bringing a brisa to support Reish Lakish. Hacholitz lemuberes v'hipila. Hipila means that now she is the Yevama with a zikas yibum. Even though at the end she miscarried, and all we had was a nefel, and therefore she's included in yibum, nevertheless she needs chalitza, and the chalitza, the original chalitza b'shas, shahaisa muberes, is not a valid chalitza. Omar Rava, hilchasa kavasi d'Reish Lakish bahani tlas. We're going to paskin like Reish Lakish in 3 different cases, only one of which is relevant to Masechet Yevamot. That's this one that we just did. Chada hod hamora means that bia v'chalitza of a muberes is not called a bia, and it's not called a chalitza. Idach, number 2 out of 3. Disnan hamachalik nechasav al piv. Now this should be if I'm not mistaken, a Mishnah in Bava Basra. Let's just double check. What is that small Zion? Just see. Yeah, at the end of Bava Basra. So we're now in Perek Nova. Now, even though the Torah gives what's called a Seder Yerusha, this does not undermine or prohibit the father, before he dies on his deathbed or whatever it might be, from being machalik nechasim. So I'll give you an example. Let's say if Bukhar normally gets pishnayim, he can decide, I want the second chelek to go to another brother, to another one of my sons. That's called machalik es nechasav kodem misasav, which he's allowed to do. A lot of people today will advise a religious Jew to write a tzava that's legally binding before it's too late. Because if he's an Orthodox Jew, then if he doesn't write a tzava, then the Seder Anachlos, as outlined in Parshas Pinchas, will be in effect. Again, what that means in the state of Israel today, I don't know. For that, you have to ask an inheritance law. So, hamachalek nechasav al piv, which can mean one of 2 things. Either it means that he wants to divide up his property amongst his sons, his heirs, as a Yerusha. He's just changing the laws of Yerusha, but it is coming as a Yerusha. Alternatively, what he has in mind is a matana. This is not a Yerusha. I can give a gift, even on my deathbed. I can give out a gift to whoever I want to. In American terms, there'd be an afkamitol gabi taxes. Because if he's just changing around the Yerusha, there's what's called an inheritance tax. But if he gives him matana, then in American law, up to a certain point, like let's say you can give a gift of $20,000 and it's not taxable. But a Yerusha is taxable. Anyway, but I'm just using that with Saber to Ozen. So what language does he use? It's the Mishnah says, Machalek nechosav al piv. What does al piv mean? Al piv means that he just said so-and-so, my son so-and-so will get so much money, and my other sons will get so-and-so. But he didn't use a language of Yerusha. That's called al piv. And therefore, whatever he gives out is called a matana. It's not called Yerusha. And on this, we're going to have a Shita Reish Lakish. So first, let's go through the Mishnah, and then we'll get to Reish Lakish. Riba li'echad u'miyat li'echad, hishva lahem es habachar, dvarav kayamim. If he doesn't mention Yerusha, it's just al piv, and his intention is to give out gifts, matanos, then even if he gives a greater gift to one of the brothers, one of his sons, than to the other, or if he equalizes the Bechar, and all the brothers will get the same, and the Bechar will get the same amount as all of his brothers, and now he's undermining the halacha pishnayim, dvarav kayam. A person has the right to give out a matana and divvy up his possessions in any way he wants. And this is not masna mashakos b'Torah. He's not undermining the Torah law, because the Torah law of Yerusha only takes place after he gave the matana. Whatever left in the pot after he gave the matana. However, the im Omar, if he said the magic words mishum Yerusha, in other words, he says, my son Reuven will inherit the field on the north, and my son Shimon will inherit the field on the south. Now he's bound by the restrictions of Yerusha, because once he used the word inherit, he means it should go in accordance with the law of Yerusha. He's not giving it as a gift. And if Reuven is a Bechar, again, I don't know, we shouldn't get into this, that's last week's parsha, but let's say Reuven is a Bechar. He gets Pishnayim. You can't give Shimon the same size field or the same value of the field that you gave Reuven. That's invalid. Lo Amar Klum. The Bechar has rights to Pishnayim. The other brothers will get an equal portion, each brother, from what's left over after he gave Pishnayim to Bechar. So if he's dividing up his possessions as a matana, then fine, because the laws of Yerusha only come into effect after he gave whatever he gave as a matana. But if, on the other hand, he's employing the parsha of Yerusha by saying, I'm giving the Yerusha to Reuven, I'm giving this as Yerusha to Shimon, then we have a problem of masna mashakos b'Torah. If Reuven is a Bechar and Shimon is going to be allotted now a Yerusha which is equal to that of Reuven, that's masna mashakos b'Torah, and therefore tno but lo omar klu. Now, I just want to mention on the side that what I just said is not 100% right according to everyone. There is a shita of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka who says that as far as the pshutim are concerned, you can redefine the Yerusha, even as Yerusha. The Masna Mashas Kosva Torah according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka only applies to the Chelik HaBachar. If you deny the Bachar his Yerusha rights to Pishnayim, that's Masna Mashas Kosva Torah. But if, let's say, you allow Reuven to get Pishnayim, and you want to rearrange the Yerusha with regard to the other brothers, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, the Torah never blocked you from doing so, and it's not Masna Mashas Kosva Torah. The Rabbanan disagree with Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, and they hold that all the pshutim get the same amount of whatever the balance after you get Pishnayim, and that would be Masna Mashas Torah if you want to give one of the pshutim more than any of the other pshutim. Okay, now we get to the Sefer of the Mishnah. Until now, we've been dealing with Al Peh, and everything depends on what came out of his mouth. Did he say, I'm giving Reuven as a Yerusha? Did I say, I'm giving Reuven as a Matan? But now we get to Ksav. He writes up a will, a document. Now, in a document, there are different sections of the document. So Kosav, Bein B'tchila, Bein B'sof, Bein B'emtza, Mishum Matana, Dvarav Kayom. What does this mean? B'tchila, B'sof, and B'emtza. Ben writes the following. And this is a case of Matana Batchila. Tinosein Sada Plonis, Libni Ploni. I didn't read the last word, but so far, what does that sound like? Tinosein Matana. And then he adds the word V'yirashena, and he writes it in the document. He starts with Tinosein. Tinosein Sada Plonis Libni Ploni, and then he adds the word V'yirashena. Now we have the opposite case. Bein Basof. He opens up his statement, again a written document, and he says Yirash Bi Ploni B'ni Ploni Sada Plonis V'tinosein. And then, after opening with the language of Yerusha, he closes with the language of Matana. Bein Ba'emtza. Okay, what's this case? Yirash Ploni Sada Plonis V'tinosein lo V'yirashena. He sandwiches a language of Matana between two Lashonos of Yerusha. But somewhere in the Shtar, which we call Ba'emtza, he mentions Matana. Dvarav Kayom. It now takes on the status of a Matana. Why? Because somewhere in the Ksav, he mentions Matana, either at the beginning, or at the end, or in the middle. It's a Pella because once he adds the word for Yerushena, it sounds like he's employing the parsha of Yerusha, which really restricts him because otherwise he might be Masna Mashas Torah, Utano Bata. But nevertheless, we're going to ignore the language of Yerusha, and we're going to choose the language and prefer the language of Matana, even if the language of Matana is sandwiched in between a Reisha and a Seifa of Yerusha. Yirash Ploni Sada Plonis V'tinosein lo V'yirashena. And Reish Lakish is going to come and shed a whole new light on this Mishnah. So now we're turning the Daf Lamed Vav Amid Beis. Now, in order to appreciate Reish Lakish here, we have to introduce Rabbi Yochanan, because Reish Lakish always argues against Rabbi Yochanan. And whenever we bring Rabbi Yochanan, by the way, it's always either Ravin or Ravasi or Ravidi, one of the Talmidim. This happens to be a statement of Ravin in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, what's the case? A man is divvying up his property to two people, neither of which are his Yosh. They're both Fremder. And he said the following, right? He's talking now about Reuven and about Shimon. He says, Yirash Ploni Sada Plonis. Reuven should inherit the following field. Again, Reuven is not an heir. V'tinasein Sada Plonis LePloni. And Shimon should receive gratis a gift of another son. So one was B'lashon Yerusha, the other was B'lashon Matana. And Ravin says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that since he mentioned the word Matana, the entire package is called Matana. Even that which he said, Reuven Yirashena, that also is a Matana. And we have a halacha principle here, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that kol nisinaso nechsheves nisina umatana. That we integrate the entire package of his nisina, that which he gives to Reuven, that which he gives to Shimon, and once we integrate them, the entire statement becomes one matana, even though he said Yirash Ploni es Sada Plonis. That's Ravin in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Again, there's some striking similarity to what we discussed before. That you remember we spoke about bows. He has a surplus of bows. As long as some of those bows will be designated for a chatnas. Here also, as long as he mentions matana somewhere, like we had a ksav that had matana either betchila or basof or b'yemtza. Here also, as long as he mentions the word matana with regard to Shimon, then his entire enterprise, his entire gift is one long gift. And forget about just ignore the word Yirashen. Amar Reish Lakish. No. That's not correct. Li'olam lo kana. Whichever person, we called it Reuven, who received a portion, B'lashon Yerusha, is lo kana. You'll ask me, but the other guy got a matana. And Rabbi Yochanan says, once there's a matana, we're going to integrate the entire package as one total matana. No, says Reish Lakish. For Reuven, he gave a matana, but for Shimon, he gave a Yerusha. And therefore, says Reish Lakish, for Shimon, who got a Yerusha, lo kana, because there's no Yerusha to someone who's not relevant. He's not an heir. He's not a Yoresh. And once he employed a Lashon Yerusha to a person who's not royal Lirash, that person is lo zacha b'nefas. So Reish Lakish, as opposed to Rabbi Yochanan, wants to split his endowment into two parts. There was one gift that he gave as a matana to Reuven, and another that he gave as a Yerusha to Shimon, and he can't give a Yerusha to Shimon, and therefore becomes masna mashikosav. Ad sheyomar, unless he uses a matana for both Reuven and Shimon, ploni uploni Yirshu sada plonis uplonis, shenesatim lahem b'matana b'yirashu. So for both of them, he mentions a language of matana, albeit ba'emtza. That he started with a lashon of Yerusha, and he ends with a lashon of Yerusha. But in the middle, between the two, he used a lashon of matan. So again, ploni uploni Yerusha sada plonis uplonis shenesatim lehem b'matana v'yirashu. So he opened up with the language of Yerusha. He closed with the language of Yerusha. But if he used the word matana for both of them in the middle, shenesatim lahem b'matana, that's a gili das that he wants to give a matana to both of them, despite the fact that he opened up with the language of Yerusha and closed with the language. But if he didn't combine the two into one statement, then we have a machlokus between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan, and Reish Lakish says that if he didn't combine the two in one statement, then vis-a-vis Ruvain, where he said Yirash Ruvain as Sada Plonis, that's invalid because it's Masna Mashakos B'Torah. Ruvain is not a Yokish. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan wants to look at the larger picture. And even though he said Yirash Ploni Sadazu, since he looks at a different Sada that he possesses, and he says Yinasein Tinasein Sadazu Leploni, therefore it's like a matana for both of them. And that's where Reish Lakish disagrees. Reish Lakish will only agree in a case where he's using a lashon matana for both of them. If he uses a lashon matana exclusive for one of the two, the other one is masna mashakos b'torah. But if he uses a matana to refer to both, like for example, ploni ploni yirshu sada plonis and plonis, shenesatim lahem b'matana, and therefore the language of matana is chal vis-a-vis both matanos, then it's valid for both of them. So this machlokes is the exception to the rule that we pass like Rabbi Yochanan against Reish Lakish, and we now have two exceptions to the rule, says Rava. Number one, we hold that chalitzas muberes or bias muberes lav shnei bia lav shnei chalitza. We're going to pass like Rabbi Yochanan, like Reish Lakish against Rabbi Yochanan. And number two, we're going to pass like Reish Lakish against Rabbi Yochanan in a case where he uses a lashon Yerusha for one and a lashon matana for the idach. Now we get to the third machlokes, Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, where we pass like Reish Lakish. Hisnan, and again, we're talking about a person who is divvying up his possessions before his death. Hakosev kol nechasav libno. He gave his son a shtar, and in that shtar he wrote all the nechasim for that ben. And that should be a matana from today and onwards. Uli achar mos. Now, this is a strange language. It's almost as if he's contradicting himself, B'nei Ubei, because he's giving all his nechasim to his ben as a gift today. But then he says, liachar mosim. Why is he saying liachar mosim? He just gave it away as a gift to his son. Now he is liachar mosim. Apparently, his intention is that the guf hanechasim should be transferred over to his son now, but he wants to continue to eat the peros. So if I sell you something today, and then I add liachar zman, then I, the giver, the nosei nesamatona, reserves the rights to eat the peros. And that means that the immediate kinyan is only chal on guf, but not on peros. So we now have a case in the Mishnah in Bava Basra where Ruvain the father owns the peros of this karka, and Shimon his son, or let's call him Chanoch, right? Chanoch his son owns the guf hakarka, split between the father and the son. Now, when you split karka in a way that Ruvain owns guf and Chanoch owns peros, or actually, let's say it the other way around, right? Ruvain owns peros and Chanoch owns the guf. There's now like a tug of war on this piece of real estate. We're pulling it in two different directions. The guf belongs to Chanoch and the peros belong to Ruvain. Who owns this karka? So I know what you'll tell me. You'll tell me that is a split. But the truth is that no one owns this karka, and both of them own the karka, which means no one could sell the karka. The father, Reuven, can't sell the karka because he only owns peros, and the guf belongs to his son Chanoch. Chanoch can't sell the karka because he only owns the guf, which is very abstract. He doesn't own the peros. So neither of them can effectuate a kinyan, akna. And that's what the Mishnah means, ha'av eini yochel limkar. Even though you would have said, let him sell that which he owns. Maybe he owns the peros, let him sell the peros. And the answer is nation is son of Leben, that the guf of the karka belongs to his son. Haben eini yochel limkar. Why can't the son sell the karka? I mean, he owns the guf hakarka. Because the father retained for himself the kinyan peros. So it seems to me, what the Mishnah is telling us is that in order to effectuate a sale, the father and the son would have to cartel, they'd have to get together as a partnership and agree to sell the karka. The father would chip in his kinyan aguf, his kinyan peros, and the son would kick in his kinyan haguf, and together as a joint partnership, they could sell both guf and peros. Now let's look at the language of the Mishnah carefully. It says haben eino yochel limkar, and it says ha'av eino yochel limkar. That's a strange language. I would have said, if I were reading the Mishnah, if I were writing the Mishnah, Rebbe was not going to call me up, but if he did, I would say, why don't you just say, Zeh mechiraso eino mechira, v'zeh mechiraso eino mechira. What is eino yochel limkar? It sounds like, lechatchila, don't do it. Well, let's read the next part of the Mishnah. Machar ha'av. The father was enjoined from selling these nechas. He's already given them as a gift, or at least a guf hakarka, to his son. But nevertheless, feifter on it, as we say in Yiddish, he went ahead. He was mocher the nechasim. Bechurim, the Mishnah says that the mafir is valid. So he shouldn't have done it, and he didn't have rights to do it. But if he did it, then we recognize the validity of that mechira. Again, he can only sell the payros, but that he can sell. But then the Mishnah says, Achi Yomos Hu, which I understand to mean that although the father has Kinyan Peros, which he retained, he can only sell that Kinyan Peros on a time-limited basis, meaning until his death. So the buyer or the recipient will continue to eat the Peros until the father dies. What happens the moment that the father dies? The buyer and his rights terminate. They come to a halt. And now the Peros are in the karka. With the death of the father, the son inherits his father. He's going to inherit now not only the guf, but also the Peros. In fact, he doesn't have to inherit the guf because he already received the guf Michayev during his father's lifetime as a gift. But now he's going to yarshin as a Yerusha the Kinyan Peros. So it means that even though we're recognizing the validity of the Kinyan and the Mechira of the father on Peros, but that's only because the father has rights to use those Peros until he dies. Once he dies, his rights in the Peros terminate, and the Peros now belong to the karka itself, to the gufa karka, and now the son will inherit the gufa karka. So the lokeach has to realize when he purchases the Kinyan Peros, it's only a Kinyan Lizman. And that should be reflected in the price. He's not going to pay, the father, Reuven, let's say, was 92 years old. He's not going to pay for 50 years of Peros. But now the Mishnah wants to know the flip side. What happens if the ben who has gufa karka, he sells the karka? Machar ben ein lokech klum ad sheyomo sa'ah. Meaning, what is the guf worth in practical terms, in concrete terms? Guf without Peros is nothing. So when the ben sells the karka, it's like a balloon full of air. It's got hot air inside. In Mamoshes, the lokeach who purchases it gets nothing. Because the Kinyan Peros belong to the father. He retained that Kinyan. So the ben can't sell the Peros. He can sell the gufa karka, but what's that worth? And therefore, ein lo lokeach klum. However, the Mishnah now qualifies this and says, ad sheyomo sa'ah. What does this mean? That the Peros are secondary to the guf. They are nigrorim achar gufa. So that when the ben who owns the guf sold that guf to the lokeach has now made a great purchase. Why? In the meantime, he has nothing. Right now, it's not worth a dime. The Peros will accrue to the father, to Reuven. But with the death of Reuven, now the lokeach gains possession and ownership over the guf. Once he gains possession over the guf, he automatically acquires ownership over the Peros. So this becomes like a mechira liachar zman, in which the lokeach his violence will materialize at some point in the future. We can't tell exactly when now, but when the father dies. The itmar. Mochar ben b'chaya av, umes haben b'chaya. Oh, now we get to the machlokas Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. Unfortunately, tragically, instead of the father dying first, which is the normal way of all flesh, the son died first. Now, the son owned the kinyan aguf. He had sold the kinyan aguf to the lokeach, and with the death of his father, if his father died first, the kinyan peros of the father is gone because he died, and now that kinyan peros is absorbed into the guf, such that now the lokeach will gain ownership over both the guf and the peros. But if the son dies first, then the father inherits the son. And now the father inherits the guf hakarka, such that the lokeach could no longer claim ownership on the peros.
Why does the father inherit the son? The son has Yoshi, maybe.
Right, the first Yorish, I think, is the father, if I remember. I'd have to go through Yesh Nochlin. Okay. Double check me on that. But if I remember correctly, again, I haven't learned Yesh Nochlin in a long time. But I think the law is that the father inherits the son first. Okay. The Ramban, in his Perish al Torah, wonders why the Torah left that out. Okay. And he says the Torah couldn't even get itself to say those words, that a father inherits his son. Anyway, that's a more of a hashkafa. So Meis haben b'chaya av. Now we get to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan lo kana lokeach. The lokeach is left empty-handed. Why? Because bishlema, if the father had died first, then the son would now gain ownership over the gufa karka, and if lokeach has rights to the gufa karka, which was purchased from the son. But if the father died first, I'm sorry, that's if the father died first. If the son dies first, then the father now takes over the karka. The father had the peros, but now he gets the guf as well. Reish Lakish amar kana lokeach. So the Gemara now explains the machlokas. What are they arguing about? Rabbi Yochanan Omar. Rabbi Yochanan says that when the ben dies first, lo kana lokeach. Because savar kinyan peros kinyan aguf damin, which means that the father had rights to peros. There was something that was holding him back because he had granted a gift to his son for the guf hakarka, but now the son is gone, and therefore his kinyan now matures and becomes a full-fledged kinyan on the guf hakarka as well. And Reish Lakish Amar kana lokeach. Because kinyan peros lavki kinyan aguf dami. So blineda tomorrow, this is where I want to pick it up. Let's analyze the machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish regarding whether kinyan peros kinyan aguf or lavki kinyan aguf. And this is going to be the third psak in the series of Rava's 3 cases where the machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, we paskin like Reish Lakish. So again, if we had more time, but I think we ran out of time, so we'll leave it there. We'll pick this up tomorrow. Okay then?
Right.
All right, Shkar, thanks for joining me and have a great day.
Too.